We're going to open up to our green tabs for our unit on transformations. Our first topic and first type of transformation was a translation. In a translation, I'm going to underline the S here and make a note to ourselves that that S in translation reminds us that the point or the shape that's on the coordinate plane is going to slide. Our second type of transformation and our second topic is a reflection. So we will write reflections as our second topic. And I'm going to underline the F in reflections, and you'll find out in our notes today and in our practice that with a reflection, the point or the shape is going to flip across either your X or your Y axis. So the F in reflections can remind us that is going to flip. So you can find the F in both of those to help you remember that they go together.
Hello students, today we'll be working on the second transformation called a reflection. This is still SOL 7.7. So reflection is a transformation that flips a figure across a line. A reflection creates a mirror image of the shape. So our image is going to be backwards from the original shape. So when we flip across a line, the line that the shape is flipped over is called the line of reflection. Notice that the shapes are exactly the same distance from the line on both sides, but they are facing in opposite directions. A reflection can also be shown on the coordinate plane. So if we want to reflect over the y-axis is the vertical axis. We're going to flip that across the y-axis and notice that it is exactly the same distance on the left side of the y-axis, but it now is facing the opposite direction. Notice that the bottom point is 1 unit away from the y-axis. The top point is 4 units away from the y-axis, but in opposite directions. Now let's reflect it over the x-axis. Remember, our x-axis is our horizontal axis. So when we flip this shape over the x-axis, it's going to end up below the axis. Again, same shape, but it's facing the opposite direction. Notice our bottom left-hand point is 1 away from the y-axis. I'm sorry, the x-axis. And our top point is now still 5 points away from the x-axis, just in opposite directions. All right, so let's reflect triangle ABC over the y-axis. Remember, our y-axis is the vertical axis. So we're going to flip all 3 points of the triangle to the right of the y-axis. And they're going to be the same distance from the y-axis, but on the opposite side. So if we look at point A, it is 2 places to the left of the y-axis. It's at -2. So we're going to flip it over and put it at +2, and that's going to be A prime. Notice point B also was 2 places to the left. So when we reflect that, we're going to move it 2 places to the right of the axis, and that's going to be B prime. And notice point C is 4 spaces to the left, or it's at -4. So we're going to flip it across the axis and put it at +4. So now notice when we sketch our triangle, it has flipped and is facing the opposite direction. Notice that C prime, which was the bottom left corner, is now C prime, which is the bottom right vertex of our triangle. All right, so let's do our new coordinates. A prime is now at 2, 4. B prime is at 2, 1. C prime is at 4, 1. All right, now let's take that same triangle and reflect it over the x-axis. The x-axis goes horizontally, so this time we'll be flipping the shape down below the x-axis. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're just doing the x-axis. So notice we'll start with A. It is at 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces above the x-axis, or at positive 4. So when we flip it, it's going to go to negative 4. Point B was only 1 space above the axis, so it goes 1 space below the x-axis and it becomes B prime. C, which was 1 space above the x-axis, goes to 1 space below the x-axis and becomes C prime. And when we sketch our triangle, it flipped over so that A is now the bottom vertex of the triangle. So let's look at our new coordinates. A prime is at -2, -4. B prime is at -2, -1. And C prime is at -4, -1. So now let's reflect a rectangle. So we're going to reflect this rectangle over the x-axis. Remember, the x-axis goes horizontally. So we'll be flipping the rectangle from below the x-axis to above the x-axis. So we'll start with point A, which is now at -2. We'll keep it on the same vertical line, but we will flip it to +2. All right, point B, which is now at -5, we're going to keep on the same vertical line and flip it to +5. Point C was also at -5, so it goes to +5. And point D was at -2, so it goes to +2. Now notice this time when we draw our rectangle, it looks the same as our original pre-image. So how do we know that this is a reflection instead of a translation? Well, notice that B and C, which were the bottom of the rectangle, are now the top of the rectangle. So we know that it has been flipped over. So now let's do our new coordinates. A prime is now at -1, 2. B prime is at -1, 5. C prime is at -3, 2. I'm sorry, -3, 5. And D prime is at -3, 2. Now let's take the rectangle and reflect it over the y-axis. So your y-axis goes vertically. So we're going to be flipping the rectangle from the left side of the y-axis to the right side of the y-axis. So point A was at -1, so we're looking at how far we are from the y-axis. It's going to stay on the same horizontal line, but end up at +1. Point B was also at -1. Keep it on the same horizontal line, but flip it to +1. Point C was at -3, so keep it on the same horizontal line. It's going to go to +3. And point D, which was at -3, is going to stay on the same horizontal line and go to +3. So again, when we sketch our rectangle, we might think that it's facing the same direction, except D and C were on the left side of the rectangle. Now they're on the right side of the rectangle, so we can tell that it's been flipped over. All right, so our new coordinates, A prime is at 1, -2. B prime is at 1, -5. C prime is at 3, -5. And D prime is at 3, -2. Okay, so we're going to reflect this triangle over the x-axis. the x-axis is our horizontal axis. So when we look at point F, it is already on the x-axis. So if I'm going to reflect a shape over the axis that it's already on, it's just going to stay there. So F prime is going to stay in the same space. G is going to flip from -4 to +4. And H is going to flip from -4 to +4 also. Then we will sketch our triangle and notice that it has flipped upside down. So let's look at our new coordinates. F stays at 1, 0. G is now at 4, 4. And H prime is at 1, 5. Or I'm sorry, 1, 4. So if you try to reflect a point over a line that it's already on, it's going to stay on that axis. All right, let's take a shape and flip it over the y-axis. The y-axis is our vertical axis. So again, if we look at point A and we try to flip that over the y-axis, it's already on the y-axis, so it's going to stay there. Its distance from the y-axis is 0, so it's going to stay 0 and stay on that axis. B prime would be at -5 on the x-axis, and C is going to also go from +5 to -5. So when we sketch our triangle, it is backwards. It has flipped over the y-axis. So A prime stays at 0, -4. B prime goes to -5, -4. And C prime goes to -5, -1. All right, so let's see if we can figure out a shortcut for naming our new coordinates. So here's rectangle ABCD. It was reflected over the x-axis. So let's look at our coordinates of point A. Point A was at -1, -2. A prime is at -1, +2. B was at -1, -5. B prime ended at -1, +5. C was at -3, -5. C prime ended at -3, +5. And D was at -3, -2. D prime ended at -3, +2. So do you see a pattern that would help us to name our new coordinates without drawing the shape? So hopefully you see that to name the new coordinates for a reflection over the x-axis, you flip the sign of the y coordinate. Because as we go over the x-axis, we're not changing the horizontal distance, we're changing the vertical distance. And our y coordinate is what determines our vertical distance. So to change the coordinates for reflection over the x-axis, you flip the y coordinate. All right, here's the same rectangle ABCD, but this time it has been reflected over the y-axis. So the y-axis is our vertical axis, so we flip it from left to right. So A, again, was -1, -2. A prime became +1, -2. B was at -1, -5, and it flipped to +1, -5. C, which was at -3, -5, flipped to +3, -5. And D was at -3, -2, and flipped to +3, -2. So, to name the new coordinates for a reflection over the y-axis, we flip the x coordinate. Okay, you're also going to be asked to identify transformations. So if we look at this shape, our original pre-image is on the left here in quadrant 3. Our new image has the prime marks over here on the right. So as you can see, we flipped over the y-axis. So this is a reflection over the y-axis. Everything is identical distance from the y-axis, but on the other side. Okay, in this shape, this is our pre-image because it does not have prime marks. Our new image is down here in quadrant 3 with the prime marks. Notice that our triangle is upside down, but everything's in the same distance from the axis. So we would say this is a reflection over the x-axis because we flipped over our horizontal axis. Now think about this one carefully. Our pre-image is up here at the top. Our image is down here at the bottom with our prime marks. Now, you might be tempted to say that this is a reflection over the x-axis because it looks like we've moved over that x-axis. But what you need to pay attention to is that our letters are in exactly the same spots on our new image as our pre-image. They have not been flipped over. So this is actually a translation. This triangle went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units, but it did not flip. So this is a translation 6 units vertically. So to name it a reflection, make sure that that shape has actually flipped and is a mirror image of itself. Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand reflections over the X and Y axis, and hopefully you're ready to practice some on your own.
Just one quick correction though, this actually should say a translation of -6 units because we were moving down rather than up. So again, this right here is -6 units vertically.